Okay, so I first would like to hear from you, Maddie. What was, if it was like an event or something you saw on social, or what really prompted you to reach out and say, I want to get support from the Find Food Freedom team?
Yeah, so I originally actually reached out, found you guys through TikTok with intentions of like this was going to be a conversation where you help me create a food plan and almost really like get myself back on track with, being healthier per se or like losing weight. And it definitely was not what I expected. It was almost like a happy mistake. So I came across by mistake, honestly, with the wrong intentions, but turning it into, more of a right intention, right place kind of situation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that is so valuable what you just said because most people, if they followed our account for like a long period of time, they might know a little bit more about the intuitive eating principles, right? Or about our weight inclusive perspective. But like you said, I love how you called it a happy mistake. But when we have people like yourself that stumble across a video or something and reach out and maybe it doesn't align with what we do, I love that we have you here to say, like, I want to ask you next, like, what was that conversation like with Grace, the provider you worked with, when you told her what you were expecting versus what you actually got? Because I know that, like, as providers, we love to hold space and be like, okay, no guilt, no shame of what you want. And here's how we can help you. Does this interest you? So I would love to hear like you just painted such a beautiful picture of what you were expecting it to be like. What was the support actually like working with a dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor?
Yeah, so when I first kind of walked into the meeting and, talked with Grace, I was kind of like, oh, this isn't really what I was expecting. But after, talking with her further, I proceeded because of just having an open mind, really, never thought of it as a perspective of let's have a healthier relationship with food rather than trying to maybe like hinder myself or limit myself per se, I guess. And this conversation around intuitive eating was really something that was more of like what I wanted to go towards rather than maybe like fight it. And a lot of things that Grace said were a lot of things that I went through like cycling. It was just,
Mhm.
I started with, this strict diet and then I would overeat in a sense of like because I never had it so sweets and so it's just such a repetitive situation that I walked into it with an open mind, listened to what Grace had to say, and really was excited to more so learn rather than change, I would say.
That's awesome. Curiosity is so key in this process. And it
Mhm.
sounds like you said, that open-mindedness and that curiosity. So you had said before you came in being like, I want a meal plan, I want to lose weight, this is what I want. How would you describe Grace's counseling style, or like what did the support look like? Because I often find it's really hard to explain to people what we do.
Mhm.
Like I'll call us like food therapists almost, but I would
Yeah.
love to hear it from your perspective of like if someone was like, okay, but what was it like working with them? Like what did they do? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's a good way to put it, like food therapist. I've been to therapy for many, many years, and that's really, I had, learned a bunch of different techniques in other areas of my life, and food was my hyperfixation at the time. So talking with Grace, she was really inquisitive. Like she would ask me how things made me feel, why I felt that way, and really listened to what I had to say and kind of went off of it. And she helped me change my vocabulary a lot as well and my mindset and a lot of things, especially with like the good and bad food. And it really changed my perspective on, everyday eating, what I did. It was, she challenged me in a good way, I would say, and never pushed me to feel uncomfortable or just made sure throughout the process, like everything was okay. And I felt like I was grasping what was going on and making sure, I was happy with the choices that we were, going through with.
Absolutely. And I love how you said like the choices we were going through with, because I feel like something that I see so true for all intuitive eating counselors is that team approach of like you're working together. I know as someone who I was trained like as classically as like I call it a diet culture dietitian where I was trained to restrict people. It felt very like authoritarian of like kind of like what you said coming into it of thinking like here's what you're going to eat. Here's what you're going to do. I'm the expert. But what I love about the intuitive eating approach is you are the expert of your body,
Yeah.
Mattie. And like Grace's job and her role was to hold that safe, non-judgmental space for you guys to work together as a team. Um, and truly to give you the skills, excuse me, to not need her anymore, which I think is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
It's always bittersweet, like getting to the end where you it's a happy thing because I've learned so much from Grace, but obviously, we'll miss seeing her, so often kind of thing. But I mean, she made me feel like this isn't all just me. I'm very much a person that I like to know the why behind things. And she very much took that into account and always took the time to explain. And I don't know, she was just always there as well. Like if I ever needed to reach out about other questions that just pop into my head as well.
Yes, and we have to eat multiple times a day, and we're always
Yes.
in our bodies. So I'm like, food and
100%.
body image questions and thoughts and obstacles come up
Mhm.
quite often when we're unpacking all of
Yeah.
this. Well, and something I thought that was so neat that you and I chatted about a bit before we hopped on was that you started with Grace on, it looks like January 6th of
Mhm.
2025. So about 4, 5-ish months of support, which is incredible to hear, how you're speaking now versus some of the things in your initial paperwork. So I'm going to read on our initial paperwork, just for people listening, we have just a few questions that go over our relationship with food and kind of why it is the way it is. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I would love for you to respond of like, is this still true for you today? Or like, how do you feel hearing this? So whatever comes up for you. We asked, how would you describe your relationship with food? We had unpleasant, neutral, or pleasant, and you had selected neutral. And then we said, explain why. And you said, I chose neutral because I sometimes have an issue with binging on sweet treats or justifying bad food because I do work out. Recently, I've started to look at food a little different and wanting to have more whole choice in food. So I would love to hear from you of like hearing that. Like, does that stand true for you? Just anything that's coming up for you.
Yeah, so with a little bit of background on why I said that was because I was going through a cycle of limiting myself. And I work out 5, 6 times a week, and I was using that as a justification to eat sweets and just whatever I wanted. When really, the first thing that Grace and I talked over the very first day, she presented a kind of diagram and said, "Is this how you feel?" And it was basically just a circle of, restricting my diet, overeating on things that maybe I restricted myself at first. And, throughout the process, the thoughts never, maybe truly go away, but they definitely are regulated. And I have much more of a healthier approach to it than I would. But, Grace just taught me like by limiting yourself, you're only going to maybe make yourself feel bad. And there's just no need to feel bad for wanting to have a treat treat when you want it kind of situation. By limiting yourself, it's only going to cause, maybe yourself to feel bad, which you should never feel bad for, eating what you want to eat in a sense.
Absolutely. It sounds like how you relate to food is different because even hearing you use, like you said, justifying air quotes bad foods. But I know
Mhm.
something you spoke about earlier was how Grace like really changed your vocabulary. And
Yeah,
hearing you just say right now, what I'm hearing you say is like food holds no morality, right? We shouldn't feel
yeah,
bad for that. Um,
100%.
so that's awesome. Awesome to hear. So the next one we asked, how would you describe your relationship with your body? And you had selected neutral. And for your explanation, you put, I lost 20 pounds last year and recently gained 10 back. Not sure if it's muscle, but I haven't been the most in love with my body recently. So I'd love to hear from you hearing that and thinking about the body image work that you've done with Grace. Where are we at now with how we just our relationship with our body in general?
Yes. So when I walked into like the situation, I was weighing myself every day, multiple times a day, and really sticking that number in my head and letting it determine how my day was going to pan out, what I ate, what I did. So that number fully had control. And one of the challenges that Grace approached me with was kind of putting the scale away and just letting it be. And just within that week of putting it away, obviously there were times where I was like, let me just, pull it out. But the more distance I put in between myself and the scale, the more I became happier. It wasn't something that consumed my mind anymore. I looked at my body and I was just like, you know what? Like, this is nourishing me. And I felt far more comfortable in my body once I did take the advice and went down the path. And now I don't even have a scale in my house. So, and I haven't really like felt the need to go back since. So,
That is incredible. I feel like we need to make a quote out of some, I don't know, I'm going to mess up how you said it, but you're like, the more distance I put between me and the scale, the happier I felt.
yeah.
That's incredible. Um, I think also just hearing what you're saying related to this, it's just it's incredible to hear this within 4 months of that change that you felt. And we often talk with clients about how, like you said, the number can have control over you. And you could be feeling great one day, right? Like physically, mentally, emotionally, and then we step on the scale and that number, like for whatever reason, we see a number, an arbitrary number that has no justification of why it needs to be whatever we think it is, and that can completely derail our day and make us feel bad. But it's like, wait, we were just feeling good. Like
Yeah.
how is that happening? So that's incredible to hear that you've had those shifts not only in your relationship with food, but also your body as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Grace was just so like welcoming. Like I felt as if I could share this information with her where I'm like, okay, I like, actually did step on the scale this one day. And it was never, well, reprimanding or anything like that. It was, it's okay. Like we're constantly learning and also sharing something personable as well. She'd be like, sometimes this is how I feel as well. Like we're not all perfect, which was good to hear too.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up because I think even now, right? Like you're at this place where you're feeling really comfortable and whatnot. We always love to validate people of like, it doesn't mean the negative thoughts about food or body are never going to come back, right? Like it's now if we have that thought or we feel that pull towards the scale, I love how you said earlier, like you love to know why. And I think
Mhm.
it's like instead of, like you said, reprimanding ourselves or like shaming or guilting ourselves, it's like, why am I looking for that validation from the scale again? Like, what's going on? Like, am I not getting a need met? Am I, hormonal? Like, has something gone on in my life, something stressful, whatever it is? Um, because our relationship with food and body is absolutely a journey that ebbs and flows. And if you feel a negative thought coming on or going back to a behavior that we've once felt was resolved, it doesn't mean you're failing. It's that look into like, oh, what's going on here? Whereas in before, it might have caused that guilt and shame spiral. So
For
that's
sure.
amazing to hear that your support matched that.
Yeah.
Was there any point um with your support with Grace, like whether it be at the beginning, probably in the beginning, like were you skeptical before signing up? I always love to ask people like before you hopped on that call or once Grace talked to you about like what she could help you achieve, were you like, I don't know if this is gonna work? Or like how did your mindset change throughout the process with her?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I said, like I expected to come in, get a nice meal plan and be on my way. When I saw my insurance covered those 6 sessions, I was like, I don't really think I'll need that, but one and done was the name of the game. And then I walked in and she started to talk a little bit more. And I was very transparent. I said, I didn't think this is how this was going to pan out, but I wanted to keep an open mind. I've done so much work in other parts of my life that I think this was kind of the final thing I had to tackle. And so, I don't think, handing someone perhaps would solve much. So it was nice to talk with Grace and really get a perspective of how I feel, why I'm feeling. So I kept an open mind, and I really like that she brought in the aspects of like there's science behind a lot of these things too, which was crazy to think about. One of the points we talked about is a lot of the way our bodies are is genetics, and um I didn't know that. So it's really good to just for her to bring facts into the aspect too. So
Yes, thank you for bringing that up because I think a lot of times on social media, as we know, there's a lot of misinformation everywhere. But I feel like I see a lot of times people spewing misinformation about intuitive eating, saying it's just like eat whatever you want. And it's
yeah.
like, of course, yes, all foods fit, and we are allowed unconditional permission to eat, but it is so much more than that. And so I'd love that you brought in that science fact there. So when it comes to working with the Fine Food Freedom team, if you had a friend come to you and say, "Hey, I was thinking about working with them," what would you say to them and why?
I would definitely tell them that to keep an open mind because I think at first, when you hear the path that you guys go down with the intuitive eating, you're almost like, well, I've had such a lifetime of, this diet culture and, just one way of thinking, that I would just say keep an open mind. It definitely is something that has evolved my life and evolved my, way of thinking around food. So I would say, 100% go ahead and just, be interactive with the course as well and be honest because if you're not, then I don't feel as if you'll fully be able to grasp the whole thing. I think honesty, like go into it honest and open-minded would be the best like advice I would give to my friends.
I love that. And I once had a client say to me, it's not just intuitive eating, it's intuitive living. And they were talking about how it's affected their life in many different aspects. So I would love to hear from you when I ask this question, whatever is the first thing that pops up. How has your
Mhm.
life changed since your relationship with food and body has changed? What have you gained from this?
I've definitely gained like a sense of freedom and like a weight lifted off my shoulders, maybe crazy as that sounds. But it is, food is an everyday thing. You have to consume food to live. So I would just say like the way of course I have the tools now. If I do have a negative thought to creep into my mind, I just think, it's okay. Like your body's going to nourish it. And also like there's no such thing as bad and good food. Everyone eats accordingly. And I don't know, I think it's just changed my life for much more positive than I had before. So I know that was kind of a jumbled mess, but in the end, like it's just changed my life for the better. I just go through my life every day eating and not really like thinking about it. So
I love that because I always I feel like I'm pulling quotes that clients say relating to what you're saying, but one of my clients a long time ago was like, I just have so much more fucking mental bandwidth now. And I'm like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
yes, right? It's like we don't have that food and body obsession that takes up so much time. So now we can pour that time into what we're passionate about and what we love doing and precious memories with friends or loved ones or whatever it is. So I'm so happy to hear you feel like your life has changed for the better because even though it's okay, we're just talking about food or we're just talking about our body, that
Mhm.
impacts everything, like you
Yeah.
said. So
Yeah. And it's great to, kind of be around people and almost share what you've learned as well because like you said, there's this diet culture around society where people are saying, "Oh, I don't want to eat that bread," or "Oh, I don't want to
mhm.
eat that second piece of bread." And I was at dinner the other night and I ate a whole loaf and I was like, you know what? Who cares? Like, honestly, I wanted that piece of bread and I ate it all. And I didn't, it doesn't even cross my mind to feel bad anymore about it. So it's just such a good feeling, honestly. Like I said, it's
Yes.
a weight lifted off my shoulders.
Yes. And I love sourdough and butter. Oh my gosh, warm at a
Yeah.
restaurant. There's nothing better.
Yeah.
There's truly nothing better.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Maddie. I think this is going to help so many people because a lot of people walk into this exactly how you did on that first session, saying, like, this is what I need, this is what I want. So I think that
Mhm.
open mind can be really helpful.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.